Today's episode is brought to you by Craftsy. Calling all crafters, are you ready to dive deep into your favorite crafting projects and learn new techniques along the way? Then it's time to join Craftsy Premium Membership. Take advantage of this special promotion. For only $1.49, you'll receive a full year of access to expert-led tutorials, patterns, and projects in every category you can imagine. With a massive library of resources at your fingertips, you'll be able to create your best work yet and bring your crafting dreams to life. Don't wait. Sign up now at craftsyoffers.com and discover the endless possibilities of Craftsy Premium Membership. Thank you so much, Craftsy. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 265 of the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals where you can strengthen your creative business, stay up to date on industry news, and build connections within our supportive trade association. Check it out at craftindustryalliance.org. Today on the show, we are talking about building a craft tool company with my guest, Kelly Brooks. Kelly and her husband, Scott Gardiner, are the husband and wife team behind Knitbrooks, where they create unique wooden crochet hooks. Kelly started Knitbrooks in 2013 while she was working as a reporter and photographer at a small community newspaper in Alberta, Canada. She opened an Etsy shop to sell online and participated in local handmade markets over the next few years. In 2017, she tried carving her very first crochet hook out of a branch she found in the forest, which was the beginning of something special. Kelly and Scott moved to Nova Scotia in 2019, and despite graduating from an Ocean Fisheries and Aquaculture program, Scott joined the Knitbrooks venture. They both decided to pursue crochet-hook-making full-time by the end of 2020. They now live on a small homestead, which includes a small flock of fiber sheep in rural Nova Scotia with their one-year-old son, where they continue to live their best hook-making life in their garage-turned workshop. So I am so excited to have you. Welcome, Kelly Brooks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to the show. I'm really excited. I've admired your beautiful crochet hooks just from a distance online for a very long time and have been so curious about how a business like this works, and especially also about a business that's run as a husband and wife team. So we are going to get to all of that, but let's start back in the beginning. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what you were like as a kid.
Okay. Oh, we're going all the way back then. I grew up in Ontario, Canada, in a little town called Dundas, which is kind of near Hamilton. I guess I grew up in a family who was always outside in the outdoors, going to cottages, forest walks. My parents definitely were the first people who encouraged my collecting of things like interesting looking sticks, which came in handy later on in my life, cool looking rocks, stuff like that. So I've always been really into nature and the outdoors, which definitely ended up playing a big part in my current business.
Yeah. And were you artsy and obviously you were interested in like the aesthetics of the things you were seeing out in nature. Were you also like making things back home, or did that kind of come later?
Yeah, I guess I'd say I was definitely more artsy than sporty.
And so what did your parents do for work?
My dad was a baker, and my mom worked in a lot of social work area. She worked at Child Abuse Council and doing research for women's stuff.
Okay.
We were never really entirely sure what her job was. Just
social work stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so when you graduated from high school, what did you intend to do next?
When I graduated from high school, I have a vivid memory of I guess I did take art in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I was really into like media arts, video editing, and making little movies and drawing at the time. And I have a vivid memory of my art teacher telling me she didn't think I was ready to graduate and that she didn't think I was ready to succeed in post-secondary and out into the real world, I guess.
Wow.
So I'm like, just look at me now, Miss Balfour.
Absolutely.
My friends always tease me about that. But yeah, once I graduated high school, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. So I took a year off and then I discovered a photojournalism program. So I ended up going to school for photojournalism for 2 years, which kind of combined my interest in writing because I was really into English class in high school. I'm a love of writing and photography, which I was just starting to get an interest in. When I graduated college, I ended up in Nova Scotia at my first big kid job, quote unquote, at a small community newspaper in Liverpool. And that's where I also fell in love with Nova Scotia and would end up returning here eventually. But yeah, I worked at a newspaper there for about a year. And then I moved back to Ontario. And then I got a job in Alberta working at a newspaper there.
Yeah, I was just going to say those community newspapers played a pretty big role for a lot of people who were sort of wanting to get into journalism or photojournalism. And I feel like, I don't know what the fate was of those newspapers now, but I feel like so much of local news has sort of been decimated. And a lot of those early, sort of first starter jobs that were important to people sort of don't exist anymore. I don't know do you know what happened to those papers? Are they still around?
I know that my first job newspaper is closed now, which I was so sad to find out.
Yeah.
When I moved back to Nova Scotia, we actually moved quite close to that location and we went back to see and it was closed. I was so sad. I'm pretty sure the paper I worked at in Alberta is still going strong though, which is nice.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah, I feel like those starter jobs are so important in journalism. And so, hopefully there can be some robust comeback of local news. And local news is also really important to the functioning of society.
Yes, I really agree. They were
yeah.
really interesting jobs, just getting to talk to all of people in the local community. It's funny because when I still am a very socially awkward person, but I was 10 times worse when I started the program at school. But it definitely helped me come out of my shell, kind of forcing me to talk to other people. But I also feel like it made me a very good listener, being a reporter. So that's probably why I'm bad at things like podcasts, because I'm the one who's used to being
on the other side.
On the other side of things. And I feel very fumbly when I'm being the one answering questions, which is evident in this podcast so far.
So, I mean, I hear you, but when you are a reporter, you do have to sort of go up to people who you don't know and ask them, sometimes questions about terrible things that have just happened to them. For example, I mean, a lot of, local news is also reporting on hardships that have, people have faced and things like that. So I can see how that would be useful as far as sort of getting out of your shell. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you mentioned in your bio that you started an Etsy shop. So what was the motivation there? Like, what were you making and how did that all come about?
So it is when I was working in Alberta and working as a reporter photographer at a small town paper like that. It's kind of like working a 9 to 5 plus an evenings and weekends job because events happen in the evenings and the weekends, but then you still have to be in the office in case something happens. So it was really stressful. I felt like I didn't have a very good work-life balance. So I kind of got into knitting and crocheting more as like a stress reliever, I guess. Really, I started knitting in college to kind of deal with the stress of that. But once you start knitting and crocheting, anyone who has started this craft knows how quickly it can escalate and how large your collection of handmade goods becomes. And like you only have one neck and one head. So once you have gifted your mom 87 scarves and she doesn't need another one, you kind of have to figure out where the rest of your knitwear is going to go. So I did know about Etsy. So I just figured I would start an Etsy shop to see if I could sell off some of my knitwear and fund my love of yarn a little bit more. And I didn't really end up selling a whole lot on Etsy. I never really found my footing. But when I started doing local markets, I had a lot more success there.
And how did you learn to knit? You said you learned to knit in college. Did somebody teach you? Did you learn on YouTube or from a book?
I actually learned to knit when I was about 9 from my mom, but I only made one project. I worked for so long, probably a year, on a scarf for my grandma. And then our Dalmatian puppy at the time shredded it before I had a
Ah,
chance. I know it was a tragedy and it traumatized me, and I didn't pick up my knitting needles again until I was in college and just looking for something to occupy my time.
and did you discover like the online knitting world? Because that's like a whole world with Ravelry and I mean, I'm not sure exactly when this was, but like Instagram and all of these people who are designers and indie dyers and stuff. Did you kind of get introduced to that world?
So this was back in, well, 2013 is when I started my Etsy shop. So a little bit before that, maybe a year or two before that, I was on Instagram, but that was back when Instagram was all like very dramatic, moody filters, and no one had like a nice, clean aesthetic feed, and things were kind of just starting. But I do remember I was following some knitwear people on there. I was a huge fan of Haley from Ozetta. I don't know if you know, well,
Hmm.
obviously, pretty much everyone in the fiber community probably knows her. But yeah, she was like my knitwear idol. And I was like, one day I'm going to be her.
Okay, so you were trying to sell these handmade goods, mostly having success locally when you were selling in person at these markets. And so tell us how you sort of decided, like, I mean, well, I guess first we have to back up to, we talked about how you learned how to knit, but how did you learn how to crochet? Because really what you do is make crochet hooks. So you're really involved in the crochet world now. So how did that piece come in?
So I inherited my great grandma's crochet hooks from my grandma, but I didn't know how to crochet at the time. And I kind of kept them tucked away for a few years, but I really wanted to make a hat for myself, but I was intimidated to learn how to use double pointed needles. Um,
Mm,
so I was like, hey, maybe I should try crocheting. And so I went on YouTube and I taught myself how to crochet, and I knit my first hat, just like single crochet in a spiral
yep.
until it fit. And then it was kind of another rabbit hole from there. I definitely picked up crocheting a lot quicker than I did knitting. Maybe
Okay.
because crochet is more forgiving than knitting is.
That's true. Yeah. And it's a little faster as well. I mean, you
Hmm.
can crochet pretty quick. And so, okay, so you had these special hooks. What were they like, the ones that you inherited? I'm like curious what those look like.
They were just your typical, like small metal hooks
Hmm.
with like that, like the plastic coating on it, I think. Or like the old school aluminum hooks. Not
Uh-huh.
ergonomic or anything, just
Basic.
what you would think about a great grandmother using.
Right. But kind of
I still
special.
have them. I love them.
I was just going
But
to say kind of special, even though they're basic because they did come from somebody special. So yeah, that's lovely. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go to how you sort of decided that it would be cool to make your own. Had you seen like a handmade crochet hook anywhere else or where did
I
that idea
actually
come from?
I stumbled across a YouTube video of someone carving a crochet hook out of a chopstick. I don't even know what I
Oh,
was looking for, but it was like a
okay.
suggested video that came up. And I was like, hey, maybe I could try doing that with a stick because I am a collector of cool things in nature. And I probably had sticks in my trunk of my car already. But I had also been following on Instagram Rue from Hand Carved Crochet Hooks and Christina from Miramar Woods. And they were a huge part of me actually launching my business. I could not have done it without those two hook carving fairies.
And what was the first hook you made like? Was it hard? Was it harder than you thought? Did it work? I mean, I could also imagine it really needs to be like super smooth in order to
It
use it.
was very interesting looking. I actually still have several of the first hooks that I ever carved. And I mean, I guess it's like when you knit your first scarf, it doesn't turn out exactly the way you think it will, and probably wasn't functional at all. Yeah, I like to keep them to look back on how far I've come because they do not look good.
But there was something about it that you loved.
Yeah, yeah, it was a lot harder than I thought I was going to be making them, because working with wood is very different than working with yarn. It's not forgiving at all. If you break it, there's no way to put it back together. If you make a mistake, there's no way to fix it. Well, sometimes there is, but definitely not the same way that you would with knitting and crocheting. The first hook I made, I just had a stick and a probably way too dull X-Acto knife,
Mm-hmm.
which probably wasn't safe either. But I mean, I liked it enough to try again.
Right, right. Okay. So, and obviously you've built this really beautiful business based on this. So you did try again. And then how did you really learn? I mean, woodworking is a whole, sort of artistic field in and of itself. And it doesn't sound like you had, a huge woodworking background. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so how did you begin to learn? I mean, you've got tools, you're like in a woodshed now, or like I know, backyard, a garage, and you've got all kinds of equipment. And I've seen your Instagram videos of you using all this impressive equipment. So how did you begin to learn how to do this?
Uh, this also brings back another high school memory of me in my grade 9 woodworking class. And if only that teacher could see me now, I'm not the same person who accidentally nailed her birdhouse to the table and cut the legs of the chair that I was making in half by accident. Yeah, I learned how to do this pretty much all by trial and error. I did
Mm.
have guidance via my online Instagram friends that I mentioned earlier. They were really encouraging and gave me suggestions on the tools that they used that I could try out. But yeah, mostly it was just a lot of trial and error. Scott had his own woodworking business at the time. He made like wooden wall hangings and live edge furniture. So he was renting at the time a workshop space, and we would kind of go every Friday or Saturday on workshop dates where I would kind of fiddle away at my sticks and he would work on his furniture or his wall hangings. But yeah, I'm pretty much all self-taught from trial and error, and it was a lot of trial and a lot of error. And watching YouTube videos, but again, you kind of have to figure out what works for you because I went through a lot of different tool suggestions and method suggestions, and what ended up working for me was totally different than what I saw other people doing.
Today's episode is brought to you by Craftsy, and here is a message from Craftsy. At Craftsy, we know making. Whether you're new to the handmade life or looking to advance your skills, we have classes for all maker levels and interests. From knitting and sewing to quilting and embroidery, cooking, baking, and paper crafts, and more, Craftsy's instructors guide and encourage you, empowering you to turn ideas into realities. And they have an exclusive offer for Craft Industry Alliance podcast listeners. Right now, you can get a whole year of their premium membership for only $1.49. Visit craftsyoffers.com to sign up, and the discount will automatically be applied at checkout. For only $1.49, you'll get a full year of access to over 2,000 premium full-length classes. Take your craft to new levels this year with Craftsy. If you're an absolute beginner, Craftsy's instructors help build strong foundations they teach, setting you up for success and helping you fix mistakes as you go. Their enthusiasm and strong teaching style make learning accessible to all. If you're an experienced maker, Craftsy is for you too. From perfecting your fondant skills to tackling complex stitches, from eye-catching garden design to next steps in sourdough, Craftsy has advanced classes in all crafts, from instructors who are experts in their field. With over 2,000 classes, including downloadable patterns and recipes, Craftsy has a class and a craft for everyone. Visit craftsyoffers.com today and get a year of Craftsy premium membership for just $1.49. Don't miss out on 99% off for the entire year. Start turning ideas into projects you can be proud of. Get this exclusive offer at craftsyoffers.com. Thank you so much, Craftsy. And now back to my conversation with Kelly. That's really cool that you had Scott's workshop dates, to be able to experiment before having to make a big investment in your own equipment and things like that. So how are the Knitbrooks crochet hooks made now? How are you sourcing wood and what do they look like? What is the process like?
So when I first started, I was just using branches. Scott used to live with his family in Ontario on a 100-acre farm. So we would
Okay.
just go into the forest on one of our little nature walks, and I'd collect sticks there because there were plenty and just use those to carve. And I still do make our original woodsy style hooks, as I call them. But eventually, when Scott and I were doing our little workshop dates, he worked with a lot of exotic woods and dressed lumber, which is when it's milled down for you already, like in nice
Okay.
little boards, all prepared and
Hmm.
ready to do your projects. And he kind of suggested that I do a hook using like exotic woods or what we call our multi-wood hooks now. So he put two pieces of wood, two pieces of different wood together and was like, hey, you should try making a hook like this. And he still laughs at me because I told him that people wouldn't like that because it didn't fit my vibe because Knitbrooks has always been so like natural and woodsy and naturey. And I was like, exotic woods and like fancy crochet hooks are not my vibe. No one's gonna want to buy that. And now they're like our most popular hooks. Like, I
Yeah.
told you so.
Right. Because you are thinking like, the whole magic of this is that it's sourced locally. Like I'm finding these things outside my door and
Mhm.
I'm using that to make this product. And exotic woods are not found outside your door. They're imported from various places, but they have this beautiful contrast because, of course, wood comes in a whole huge range of shades.
Yeah, so that whole process was a lot of learned lessons for me, being that you kind of box yourself in a business. You can accidentally box yourself into what you think
Right.
your business should be, and that can kind of prevent you from growing into something that maybe you never would have expected. It also was a lesson in letting someone else into my process because I've always been very specific with what I want. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I like things my way. So having someone else suggest, hey, like maybe you should do this and having it work out, I was like, ah, okay.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, many, many lessons were started once I kind of let Scott into my process
Hmm.
and branched out, no pun intended, or maybe it is intended, into something that I wouldn't necessarily have ever thought of myself.
Right. Okay. So did you make like a batch with the exotic woods kind of layered and then put them up, to share them on Instagram or something like that? And how, like, what was the reaction sort of immediately when you did that versus the ones you had been making from the found twigs and things?
Well, I will give you one guess as to which hook sold first. The one that
Mm.
Scott put together.
Oh, because he made one.
Yeah, well, so our process is he now makes all of the hook handles. So, like all
Okay.
of the different intricate, cool designs that you see on our hooks, that's all Scott's wood wizardry. So, Scott is in charge of making all of the handles, and then I do the hook tops. So, like the actual carving of the neck and the head. So, if we're doing like a collection or something, I'm usually the one who is in charge of coming up with the concept of the collection. So if we're doing like certain wood color palettes or like a theme, I come up with that. I make my suggestions of what woods I think we could use, but then ultimately Scott is the one who ends up putting them together. So we purchase our wood at a local exotic hardwood store now. We did start out using like leftover scraps of wood from Scott's woodworking business and other woodworkers that we knew. But as we grew, we kind of ran out of scraps. So now we purchase our wood locally. So they're both exotic woods and domestic. And we get them in board form, so dressed lumber boards. So in the beginning, Scott mills all that down into the size that we need and then assembles them into what we call blanks. So he does all like the intricate designs like chevron. We have a design called Art Deco that has like circles and curves and triangles and anything his brain can come up with, he puts it into a handle and then those are rounded down and he kind of preps them for me to do the neck and the head of the hook. So I do that using a combination of wood files, carving knife, sandpaper. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and like a little saw. And then once I have carved the hook, then the hook goes back to Scott and he finish sands it. till it's a yarn-worthy smoothness. And then once they're finished sanded, I would burn the size into the handle in the millimeter. And then once that is done, then they go through their wood treatment process. So they get 3 to 4 rounds of a polyurethane wood sealant just to protect it from moisture and give the hook a long life. And yeah, once they're done that, their little spa treatment, then they get like their final buff and then they're ready for their new home. So it is quite a long process.
Yeah.
But Scott and I both do the process together, and neither one of us would be able to do it without the other now.
Yeah. And I know he's kind of joined the business despite he had his own kind of career prior to this. How did you know? I mean, that's a big risk, because you have both partners' full kind of income potential, kind of betting on this one venture. So how did you kind of come to the idea like this might work? And at what point did you take that leap?
So when we left Ontario at the end of 2019 to move to Nova Scotia. And once we moved to Nova Scotia, I kept a job part-time remotely that I had previously had, and then was doing Knitbrooks part-time while Scott went to school full-time for his aquaculture program. So that was September 2019. And then March 2020, I'm sure everyone remembers what happened then. The entire world pretty much shut down. Scott's program went to remote learning, and everyone was home and apparently wanted to pick up crocheting or treat themselves. And our hook sales actually really took off to the point where when Scott graduated, instead of trying to find a job in his field, he ended up just going right into Knitbrooks full time. It was kind of an easy decision with where the world was and where we were, because he didn't get to do his second placement, which probably would have resulted in a job. So we were kind of like, well, we could either see what happens with your job hunting, or we could kind of take the plunge. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but we won't know unless we try. And here we are almost 4 years later, still going. So it's
Yeah. That's super impressive. Yeah. And I think there's also kind of a risk too, because so many of us saw a huge pandemic bump who work in the craft industry because, of course, everybody was home. And when you don't have the option to go out places, you are, sort of crafting and shopping online and all of that. But then when the world opened up again, a lot of people had sort of overhired, maybe overbought for inventory and things like that. And the demand didn't keep steady. And so there was challenges there. So it's sort of risky to say, okay, well, let's all go all in because we have this huge bump in sales, but it's obviously sort of artificially created by this, sort of terrible world event that will eventually subside. And then what, So did you see a decrease after, the world opened up again, maybe 2021, 2022? And how did you kind of deal with that or keep that momentum going? Because that's such a huge challenge.
Yeah, good question. So 2020, 2021 were both really good years for us. And then 2022, things definitely started to drop off a little bit. And then I actually had a surprise pregnancy. So I was really sick for a lot of that year with like nausea, fatigue, and which was scary business wise because our tasks are basically split 50-50. Like I can't really do what Scott does, and Scott can't really do what I do. So our production itself dropped so significantly, our income dropped significantly to the point where Scott was like, maybe we should explore other avenues. He ended up getting a job at a nursery just to kind of give us a little bit of cushion because we were pretty stressed out financially, and then like surprise baby. But then by the end of, I think by the end of 2022 and going into 2023, our sales did pick up. They started picking up, but then of course you always have like social media algorithm woes and trying to navigate that whole area too. Yeah, if 2022 and a bit of 2023 were pretty tough for us. We ended up starting another side business just because we were worried financially, but the beginning, what year are we in now? 2024? the beginning of 2024 was actually our biggest, most successful pre-order we've ever had. So I'm hoping that things continue that way. But as a small business, you never really know, which is stressful and scary to have in the back of your mind. But I guess we'll just keep riding the wave as long as we can and see what happens.
And you mentioned pre-orders, which is a popular way to sort of manage the upfront investment in making something new because you've got this audience who's already said yes. So has that always been the way that you've sold your crochet hooks, or talk a little bit about that decision to do pre-orders and how that works for you?
We started off selling our hooks through scheduled shop updates with ready to ship hooks. So I would make a tiny batch, like my first shop updates were like 15 or 20 crochet hooks, and it took me like a couple months to get to that point. So I would take a picture of each hook and list it online with all the information, the size. If you clicked that listing, that was the exact hook that you got. And for a couple of years, I did it that way because I didn't trust myself to be able to make the exact size that someone wanted. I kind of just let the hook become whatever size it felt like being without the pressure of knowing that that hook had to be a specific size. Because I was still a newbie woodworker, like I was still learning, and I didn't want the pressure of needing to create something specific for someone. So I kind of just made whatever my heart felt like making and put it out into the world and hoped that people wanted it. But eventually people were like, oh, I would love this wood combination in this size, or like, can you make this size with these colors? And so I'm trying to remember when we did our first pre-order. I think maybe 2022. Yeah, maybe 2022. We opened up a pre-order and people got to pick their hook style and the size that they wanted. I haven't actually reflected in a long time about how quickly we're able to make things and get them out the door. It's kind of neat to look back on. You forget where you started sometimes and how slow you are in the
Yeah.
beginning when you don't really know your craft yet. So, yeah.
So do you take a limited number of pre-orders, or do you just open that door as wide as it can go?
So usually we just kind of do an open-ended pre-order. We leave it open for a week, and then whatever orders come in, we'll do that. And then it's usually about a 12-week turnaround time. And then if we get more or less, we'll kind of update our turnaround time based on that. However, in January, we got more orders than we ever have before, and it kind of killed my soul a little bit working through all those. And for our next pre-order, we're going to cap the numbers just so that it's more manageable.
And what about pricing? I mean, right, you could go to a big box craft store and buy an aluminum crochet hook in a multi-pack for not very many dollars. Or you can go to a thrift store probably, and there's tons of them there that you could get for cents. But these are a very special tool. And of course, as a crafter, I love handmade tools and I love really quality tools because I feel like it makes the sort of act of creating so much more pleasurable and special, and you're connected to the person who made the tool. Like, it's just, there's so much to enhance it. But I don't know if you've had to change your pricing over time, maybe as demand has increased, or if you, as you've gotten a better understanding of really how long it takes to make this and source all these supplies. I mean, I think a lot of us underprice in the beginning and then are like, wait a minute, I can't, sell this at cost. I'm going to drown here. So how has pricing been for you guys?
Well, the first crochet hooks that I was making out of sticks, I think I sold them for like $30 Canadian each, something like that. But to be fair, looking back on them, they were very derpy looking. So I'm like, okay, that's probably a fair price. And every once in a while, one of my original customers will post a picture of their old crochet hook. And I'm like, how is that even going through a stitch? Like the head is so nubby. I'll have to send you a photo after what they used to look like. So pricing is definitely one of the things that I've always had anxiety around because, as a creative person, like you said, you often undervalue your work and you're so like emotionally connected to your things. So you're like, what if people don't want them? Should I price my things lower? Like, and again, like you mentioned, you can just go to Walmart and buy a $2 crochet hook. Why is someone going to spend like $80 Canadian on something that I made that they could just get for $2 at their local Walmart. So yeah, like many other creative people, pricing is definitely something that I have struggled with. I basically just have to put it out of my mind. When I'm packaging orders, I have to purposefully not look at the order total of someone's order because I just don't want to see how much money, like their hard-earned dollars, have gone to something that I've made.
Yeah, I think it's tough. And I think you're not alone in having that same feeling. It's tough, but at the same time, you are working really hard and these are very special, one of a kind pieces. And so, you do deserve to be paid for it. And I would love to talk a little bit about your motherhood because, you started this and working, as a creator before having a child. And then, as you said, it was a surprise pregnancy and you were sick. And I can relate to that because I was also very sick during pregnancy.
Oh no.
And it's so tough. I mean,
There is nothing like pregnancy fatigue. There is
you
nothing
can't,
like it.
yeah. And I was super nauseous and all of that. So, and I've had 3 kids and with each pregnancy it got worse, not better.
Oh
So,
no.
yeah. So, I mean, I totally understand what you're talking about not being able to function really during that time. But how has parenthood, I guess, for both of you sort of changed things in the business?
Well, we have an annual pass on the struggle bus now. But I will just start everything out by saying how lucky we are to have a really amazing support system. Scott's mom and my mom are both within like 15 to 30 minutes from us. So they're over all the time watching our son so that we can actually get some work done. We would not be able to do it without them because I know a lot of people don't have that village everyone talks about, and we are so, so lucky to have that, and we wouldn't be able to do it what we're doing otherwise. I do feel very lucky also that Scott and I both get to be home kind of doing full-time parenting while also pursuing our dream, which I know, again, a lot of people don't get to do. So like
Yeah.
it's really difficult. Like I'm more tired than I've ever been, but it's also a really amazing experience too.
Yeah. That you're both there. Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's really
And
lovely.
I'm enjoying motherhood a lot more than I thought I would. Pre-pregnancy, I hadn't really decided whether or not I wanted kids, and then the decision was kind of thrust upon me, and I was like, okay, we're doing this. We're gonna send it. We decided. So it turned out way better than I ever could have expected.
I think you're not alone in having those ambivalent feelings, even if you always wanted to have a child, once you have the child, there can be a lot of ambivalence. And I think it's something that people should talk about more. I think everybody expects, oh, you must be so happy. Well, there's also sadness and loss in your old life and freedom and a lot of things. So,
I was very worried
yeah,
about losing my sense of self, and
yeah.
I consider myself a very ambitious person. My business is my baby. I had all these ideas and plans, and I wasn't sure how motherhood and parenthood was going to affect that. But I did end up realizing that having a baby, you can kind of just incorporate that baby into your current life versus like having your life. I don't want to say not have your life revolve around them because they do end up becoming kind of the center of your world, but they kind of just merge into the life that you currently have instead of having to like completely rearrange and everything. But again, I know that's coming from like a very privileged place. We're lucky to have a village. So that allows us to do that. And I don't think I would be enjoying motherhood as much as I am without our parents. So
I'd love to talk a little bit about Instagram. I mean, and now that I know about your photojournalism background, your Instagram video skills sort of and photography skills make a little bit more sense. But the Knitbrooks Instagram account is really, really great. And you definitely spend a lot of time working on it and letting people into the workshop and into the process and into your feelings and things like that through Instagram. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your approach to Instagram and how much time you're really devoting to this on a daily or weekly basis.
well, when I first started really getting into Instagram, it was back when I was working in Alberta as a reporter photographer. So obviously I was very interested in photography at the time. And I guess I guess I would say Knitbrooks was a way for me to combine everything that I really enjoyed doing. Like I really enjoyed being creative. I really enjoyed photography. I really enjoyed nature. And so I got to make something with my hands and like go for a walk in the woods or to the mountains and take pictures of the stuff that I made there. And it all kind of fit together really nicely. So I started posting a lot of my creations and adventures on Instagram, and that's kind of where I ended up connecting with a lot of people. My feed definitely doesn't look as cool as it did back then now. Woodworking in a dusty, dirty shop doesn't photograph as cute and cozy as knitwear does.
Are you spending a lot of time on a daily basis, like creating reels and things like that, and responding to comments and DMs? And I mean, it's a lot to manage.
I wish I had more time in a day now, but we have a tornado 1.5-year-old. So my time is a lot more limited than it used to be. I used to really enjoy making content. Now, sometimes it feels like a little bit of a chore, but I know that's just the season that I'm in right now. It's also hard when you can't keep up with social media trends because you don't have the time to kind of look into it anymore. So you can work really hard on putting something together, but then it doesn't reach your audience or
Hmm.
nobody sees it. And yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of have a love-hate relationship with social media. Like our business wouldn't be operating the way it it is now without social media, and I wouldn't have met all these amazing people that I have without it. But if I could leave social media, maybe I probably would. I don't know. I feel like a lot of creators probably feel like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, totally. That ambivalence, I think, is, yeah, really common. And I think the answer to this question is no, but what about wholesale?
I was actually looking into wholesale right before I got pregnant. I was doing a lot of things right before I got pregnant, but that are on the back burner right now, but hopefully I'll get to them eventually. Scott and I have actually been doing prototypes of crochet hooks that have a metal tip versus just a wood tip. And I think once we finalize those, wholesale will definitely become an option for us because that's something that Scott can do completely without me. So I can kind of focus on the wood hook tops and then he can kind of focus on the metal hook tops. And hopefully that'll be a way to kind of branch out
Mm.
off of the online world. And I would love to be in yarn stores. That would be amazing. It's just we haven't had the time or capacity to do that yet, but it is on our list. I have a list of yarn stores that have reached out over the last several years that I'm hopefully they'll still be interested when we're in the position to do that. But I
Yeah,
think
and I
you
think
reach a
it's,
whole new audience of
yeah,
people going wholesale
totally.
route.
Yeah, and I think it's actually really interesting to think about the need to actually create a different product in order to be able to do wholesale. I think a lot of people assume, well, I can't wholesale this exact thing that I'm making right now, and so I can't do wholesale. What actually, if there's a variation on it that would allow you to have this at wholesale pricing and at the quantities needed and things like that, maybe, that's the thing that you sell to yarn stores and it's something different from what you're selling direct to consumer. So I think that's really an interesting option for people to think through.
And I never thought about it like that either,
Mm.
to kind of tweak a current product
Yeah.
to be used in a way that, yeah, never thought about
Yeah,
it like
to
that.
sell it differently. Exactly. No, I think it's actually a really good idea. And it differentiates so that the yarn stores too, and all retail stores, local retail stores really appreciate getting something that isn't available elsewhere. You know what I mean? Like a special style or that you can't buy online, but that's made by the maker that you love, but you can only get it when you go to the store. And I think that is a way to sort of really support our local retailers. So it's doubly nice.
Yeah, I
Okay.
love to work
Yeah.
with yarn stores to like create something totally unique for them.
Yeah. That's
Goal
super cool.
list. Yeah.
Goal list. Exactly. Exactly. Okay. I would love to get to your recommendations if that's okay with you, because you've got some good ones. So you said here that you would like to recommend knitting a sweater using your own Annapolis Fiber Company yarn. So tell us a little bit about Annapolis Fiber Company.
Yes. How could I forget? Okay, so when was it? 2021 or 2022? Pandemic brain again. I saw a listing for a local fiber mill job when I wasn't looking for a job. But then when you see a job come up like that, you're like, okay, that looks really cool. So I applied and I ended up working at Taproot Fiber Mill, which is a local fiber mill in Nova Scotia. They're very cool. You should check them out. So I learned how to process raw fleece into yarn and roving, which was a really amazing experience. It's such a cool process. If you've never had the opportunity to go to a local fiber mill, you should do it because it's like magic. So the mill manager there, Sarah, we ended up starting our own little yarn business with a focus on Canadian sourced wool, untreated wool, yeah, called Annapolis Fiber Co. So it's still in its baby stage, but we have launched a couple of collections of 100% Canadian Rambouillet, which is a type of merino. And we've been doing matching hook and yarn collections. Yeah, so we come up with a theme or a color palette, and then Sarah is still the manager at the fiber mill, so she creates all the yarn and I create the hooks, and it's been really fun to make matching things. Kind of matching wood to fiber has been really cool. Just like something new for us, keep things interesting. Yeah, so Annapolis Fiber Co. is another little side venture I'm on.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love it. And you also wanted to recommend listening to audiobooks and using the Libby app, which is free through the library.
Yes, when my pre-knitting, I read so much. I love to read, but then once I picked up knitting and crocheting, I wasn't able to do the two at the same time until I discovered audiobooks a few years ago. And now I spend all day in my workshop making hooks and listening to books. And then when in the evenings, and by evenings, I mean like that 1 hour a week where I'm not too tired to knit anything, I can listen to an audiobook and knit at the same time.
Yeah, it's great. And it's great to be able to get them from the library. So
Yeah, Libby is awesome. Your
yeah,
local libraries are awesome. You should go there.
I agree,
We go
100%.
weekly.
Yes, my kids love it and always have. So I agree. And then your final recommendation is having green tea in handmade pottery mugs.
Yes, my pottery mug addiction. I started out with the goal of replacing all of my store-bought mugs with handmade mugs, which I did, and then I just kept going. So every morning I get to choose a handmade mug that reflects my current mood and make a tea or a coffee in that. And it just tastes so much better. People have recommended me getting one of those like self-warming mugs because I get distracted and my coffee ends up cold and I end up doing 5 reheats in the microwave. But if I did that, then I wouldn't get to use my handmade mugs.
Right. And it's just like having a handmade crochet hook. It just makes the whole process so much more lovely.
Yes. You get a $2 mug at Walmart, but I'm going to spend $2 on a pottery mug.
Exactly. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for having me and for enduring my social awkwardness.
Anytime. And you've been listening to the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today's episode was brought to you by Craftsy. Calling all crafters. Are you ready to dive deep into your favorite crafting projects and learn new techniques along the way? Then it's time to join Craftsy Premium Membership. Take advantage of this special promotion. For only $1.49, you'll receive a full year of access to expert-led tutorials, patterns, and projects in every category you can imagine. With a massive library of resources at your fingertips, you'll be able to create your best work yet and bring your crafting dreams to life. Don't wait. Sign up now at craftsyoffers.com and discover the endless possibilities of Craftsy Premium Membership. Thank you so much, Craftsy. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals. When you become a member of Craft Industry Alliance, you get in-depth coverage of craft industry news, the opportunity to connect with fellow professionals for advice and support, and access to an educational library filled with ideas, tools, and resources to help you as you build your business. Join us at craftindustrｙalliance.org. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.